For the past few years, various speakers, both conservative and liberal, had been disinvited from college campuses because of what they had said or because of their stance on various issues. This was predominant in 2016, based on an article from Business Insider. One of the many examples they provided was at Brown University when Janet Mock, a TV host and transgender rights activist, withdrew from a speaking event because of a protest by students. According to the student protesters, the reason for this was because of Hillel, a pro-Israel group that had co-sponsored the event. They said, quote, "Hillel as a corporation has consistently defended and even advocated for the Israeli state's policies of occupation and racial appetite. Israel's violent policies center on colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide of native Palestinians, and they charged that it has guidelines set in place to ensure that no speaker hosted by Hillel is allowed to rigorously critique Israel." At California State University at Los Angeles, Ben Shapiro, an American conservative political commentator, writer, and lawyer, was harshly criticized for his proposed lecture. His dissenters claimed that his lecture on microaggressions, Black Lives Matters, and safe spaces was an attack rather than a debate. Shapiro's invitation was revoked, but he was later invited again after threatening legal action. At the University of California at Berkeley, Nicholas Dirks, the chancellor of Berkeley, was invited to speak about higher education, but the public discussion was shut down by student protesters. They chanted and shouted over him and argued that his salary was too high and that he wasn't doing enough for black students. Similarly, Anita Alvarez, the Cook County, Illinois state attorney, was silenced by both student and non-student protesters at the University of Chicago. She was invited to speak about the importance of tougher penalties against criminals, specifically those using illegal firearms. However, protesters claimed that she was responsible for, quote, state violence against black and brown people in the city of Chicago. This was based on a press release from Black Lives Matters, and this lack of trust between the African American community and police enforcement was fresh after 17-year-old Laquan McDonald was shot and killed by police. The University of Chicago had another instance in which Bassem Ait, a political analyst and former Palestinian human rights activist, was invited to talk. His comments were seen as pro-Israel, and so students advocating for the Palestinian cause interrupted his speech, demanding that he stop speaking on behalf of Palestinians. At George Washington University, Action Bronson, aka Aryan Arslani, an American rapper, reality television star, and author and talk show host, was invited to perform but had his invitation revoked by the college. This was due to claims that his lyrics were misogynistic and that he had a history of public transphobia. The reason? The administration, after receiving pressure on social media and a petition with hundreds of signatures. The same thing happened to him at Trinity College. Over 1,300 students signed a petition that said, quote, allowing Action Bronson to perform at Spring Weekend would create a psychologically harmful and drastically unsafe space for women, LGBTQIA+ students, and survivors of sexual assault. At Hampshire College, Dr. Emily Wong, a physician at Massachusetts General Hospital, planned to give a commencement speech, but her request was revoked by the school. This was in response to concerns raised by the students, stating that she could not, quote, directly address student concerns regarding racial issues and transphobia. She was then replaced by activist Raina Gosset. John Brennan, the director of the CIA, was invited to speak at the University of Pennsylvania but was disrupted by protesters. They were opposed to his involvement for drone strikes in the Middle East, and so the event ended early. Nir Birkat, an Israeli businessman, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and politician, was invited to a speech event at San Francisco State University. However, he was forced to end the event early after being met with a group of pro-Palestine protesters. He was still able to speak, but only to a more smaller audience. A professor at Virginia Tech invited Jason Riley, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, to speak, but revoked his invitation due to pressure from the administration. This was due to raise concerns for what he had written about race issues. Williams College had 2 instances in which speakers were silenced. One of those speakers was John Derbyshire, a writer and journalist. Adam Falk, the college president, canceled the event after citing several of Falk's writings, some of which were considered racist. The second was Suzanne Vanker, an author and social critic. Her invitation was revoked due to her criticism of feminism. She once wrote an op-ed piece for Fox News explaining why women were having a hard time finding husbands. All of these instances may have happened in 2016, but it seems that they keep happening to this day. There is a group called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and they publish a database which lists nearly every similar instance in the United States, and they go back as late as 2000. In this database, the most recent incident was in April 2018. Nigel Farage, a British broadcaster, political analyst, and a former member of the European Parliament for the South East England constituency, was invited to the University of Maryland to engage in a public debate with Vicente Fox, the 55th president of Mexico. The debate was on nationalism, globalism, and free speech. However, a few protesters tried to cancel the event by handing out pamphlets condemning Farage and his previous statements, and even sent several letters and emails to the office. Despite these protests, the event continued as scheduled. Even though this event wasn't canceled, this doesn't change the fact that a group of students tried to shut down the event because they didn't like what Farage had to say. This is evidence that the state of civil discourse and debate is under threat by an irrational level of standards held against invited speakers, whether they were associated with controversial groups or organizations, or have said questionable things in the past, or simply had a different opinion. These instances that have been happening for over 18 years, perhaps even longer than that, have raised several questions. What has become of the state of civil discourse, and why are these standards being enforced?